Life had its own way of being unremarkable for me. My name's Rita, and at 29, you find me nestled in the quiet corners of the local library. It wasn't glamorous or thrilling, but it was my sanctuary. The books were my companions, and the dusty shelves my domain. I wasn't one for the spotlight, content to fade into the background. The town was small, the kind where everyone knew your business before you did. My daily routine rarely varied. Wake up, work, and then home to my tiny apartment, filled with secondhand furniture and a mountain of books. My social life was non-existent, and I was fine with that, or so I kept telling myself. Then Ethan walked into my life on a day much like any other. He was searching for a book, something different, he said. His smile was easy, and his voice carried a warmth that felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. Hey, could you help me find a book? I'm feeling adventurous, he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Sure, what genre are you interested in? I asked, adjusting my glasses and trying not to get too caught up in his gaze. I don't know, surprise me, he replied with a grin that suggested he enjoyed the challenge he'd set before me. That was the beginning of everything. Our conversations became a regular part of my days. He'd ask about books and I'd recommend titles, but soon those chats shifted from the pages of novels to the details of our lives. Ethan was different. He listened in a way that made me feel seen for the first time in a long while. One day, he came in looking more determined than usual. You know, Rita, you're the most interesting person I've met in this town. Why do you hide in here all day? He asked, leaning on the counter with a playful challenge in his eyes. I laughed, a sound that felt strange even to my own ears. Well, where else would I go? This town isn't exactly bursting with excitement. Ethan's response was quick. Maybe you just need someone to explore it with. How about dinner tonight? My treat. I hesitated, not used to this kind of attention. I don't know, Ethan. Come on, what's the worst that could happen? You spend an evening out with a guy who enjoys your book recommendations. Plus, I promise to make it worth your while. You can show me this hidden gem of a town, he coaxed, his confidence infectious. Against my better judgment, I found myself agreeing. Okay, sure, but no fancy places. I don't do well with all that pomp. Ethan's smile lit up the room. I'll pick you up at 7. Wear something comfortable. That night changed everything. Ethan showed me parts of the town I'd never seen despite living here my whole life. He made me laugh, a deep, genuine laugh that I hadn't known I was capable of. He listened to my stories, my dreams, and my fears, never once making me feel small or insignificant. As we walked back to my apartment, he stopped and looked at me, a seriousness in his eyes. Rita, I know we've only just met, but there's something about you. You're not like anyone I've ever known. You're genuine, and in a world full of fakes, that's rare. I didn't know what to say. No one had ever spoken to me like that before. Ethan, He gently placed a finger on my lips. You don't have to say anything. Just know that I see you, Rita. I see the person you are, and I like what I see. Ethan became the sweet spot in my day, making everything seem brighter with his care and affection. He had a way of making me feel seen, calling me beautiful, kind, and smart, things I hardly believed about myself. It was his warmth that won me over, making the idea of forever seem not just possible but desirable. When he popped the question, it felt like a dream. Marry me, Rita. I can't imagine my life without you, he said, his eyes shining with sincerity. I didn't hesitate. Yes, I breathed out, feeling the swirl of excitement and disbelief. But before we could get lost in the whirlwind of wedding planning, there was one crucial step we had to take: meeting his parents. Ethan had given me a heads up, a sort of pre-warning. My folks have a bit of a high standard for who I bring home, but don't sweat it. They're going to love you once they see how amazing you are, he assured me. Though his words were meant to ease my nerves, I was a wreck before the meeting, rummaging through my wardrobe for something that said modest yet dignified. It felt like an impossible dress code to crack. Ethan, on the other hand, was the picture of calm, almost indifferent, as if the outcome of this meeting didn't weigh on him at all. You're overthinking it, Rita. Just wear what you're comfortable in, he said casually, which only frayed my nerves further. The day arrived, and I chose a simple blue dress that I hoped struck the right balance. As we drove to his parents' house, Ethan seemed more preoccupied with the music on the radio than the impending introduction. Are you sure they're going to like me? I asked, seeking reassurance. They'll come around. Just be yourself, Ethan replied, his attention briefly flitting to me before returning to the road. His laid-back attitude felt jarring compared to the storm of anxiety brewing inside me. Walking up to the door of Ethan's childhood home, my heart pounded. His earlier warnings echoed in my head, painting a picture of the scrutiny I was about to face. The doors swung open, and we were greeted by Ethan's parents, their expressions unreadable. The dinner that followed felt like a minefield. Ethan's parents grilled me with questions that felt more like an interrogation than casual conversation. "So, Rita, Ethan tells us you work at a library. Do you see yourself doing that long term?" his father asked, his tone suggesting he found my job lacking. I fumbled for an answer, trying to sound confident. "I love working there. It's fulfilling in a way I can't quite describe," I said, hoping my passion would be enough to win them over. Ethan was strangely quiet throughout, offering little support as I navigated the barrage of questions and veiled criticisms. It felt like I was alone on the battlefield, with Ethan retreating into the role of a passive observer. As we drove home, the silence in the car was deafening. I couldn't help but feel disappointed, not just in the evening's events but in Ethan's indifference. "I thought you said they'd warm up to me." I finally broke the silence, my voice tinged with hurt. Ethan shrugged in a frustratingly nonchalant gesture. "Give it time, Rita. They just need to get to know you better," he said. His words did little to comfort me. After a few more dinners that felt more like interrogations than friendly meals, it was clear Ethan's folks weren't my biggest fans. They saw me as some kind of gold digger, which couldn't be further from the truth. I never cared about Ethan's money. Heck, I barely knew about it until he mentioned it one evening. "My parents are a bit old school, you know. They worry about the weirdest things like money and status," Ethan had said. One night, Ethan came home looking more serious than usual. "Babe, we need to talk," he said, avoiding my eyes. That's when I knew something was up. "What's wrong?" I asked, feeling my stomach tie up in knots. "It's my parents," he said. He finally looked at me, his expression serious. "They're insisting we sign a prenup," he said, the word feeling foreign and bitter on my tongue. "Ethan, you know I don't care about your money, right?" I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He sighed, running his hands through his hair. "I know, and I don't care about it either, at least not when it comes to us. But they're adamant about it. They think it'll protect both of us or whatever." I was hurt, not going to lie. It felt like they were already betting on our failure. But I loved Ethan more than I cared about his parents' approval or some legal agreement. "Fine," I said more sharply than I intended. "Let's sign it and be done with it. Your money, my money. Whatever. I don't care. I just want you." Ethan looked relieved, and a part of me hated that. "Thank you, babe. I hate this as much as you do, but it's just a piece of paper. It won't change anything between us." So we signed the damn thing. Some lawyer, who was a friend of his parents, drew it up, making sure neither of us could touch the other's assets if things went south. It felt like signing a declaration of distrust before we even started, but I pushed those thoughts away. I was in love, and love was supposed to conquer all, right? Our wedding was nothing grand, just the way I wanted it. A few close friends, an intimate ceremony, and the promise of forever. I moved into Ethan's place shortly after. It was a nice house, nothing too fancy, but it felt miles away from my old apartment. Ethan's parents lived nearby, which soon meant surprise visits that seemed more about checking up on me than anything else. Life with Ethan started off like something out of a fairy tale, but it wasn't long before the gloss began to fade, revealing the grim reality beneath. The shift wasn't immediate, but the signs were there, creeping in slowly and eroding what we had built. His mother, Linda, was the first crack in our perfect picture. She dropped by unannounced, her eyes scanning the house like she was taking inventory. "Remember, this is Ethan's house. Everything here is his," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. I tried to stay calm. "I'm well aware, Linda. I'm not here for your son's things. I love him." She scoffed. "Love doesn't pay the bills, dear. Just remember, if you ever leave, you leave with what you came with. Nothing." One day she paraded around the house, pointing out every piece of furniture, every appliance, every knick-knack that Ethan owned. "See this couch? Ethan's. That painting. Also Ethan's. Remember, dear, in case things go south, you have no claim over any of it," she said, her voice laced with venomous sweetness. It was as if she relished reminding me of my place in their world. Ethan's father, George, wasn't any better. He and Linda acted like they owned our house, not just visited. They demanded coffee the moment they walked in and critiqued everything from the decor to the way we ran our household. How I'd ended up in this mess, I couldn't even tell. Sitting in front of the TV, George would command me like I was his personal servant. Grab us some of those chips, will you? And maybe wash those clothes piling up in the corner while you're at it, he'd say, barely looking up from the screen. The worst part was Ethan's response. He'd just laugh along, adding his own jabs. Yeah, she's still learning how to do things right around here. Give her time. I felt like I was losing my mind. This wasn't the man I married. This was someone else. Someone cruel and dismissive. Do you even hear yourself? How can you let them treat me like this? I confront Ethan after his parents left, trying to keep my voice steady. Babe, they're just set in their ways. You know how old people are. He'd shrug off, making it sound like I was the one overreacting. They don't mean anything by it. Plus, you know we're on their dime. Can't bite the hand that feeds, right? That line hit me like a slap in the face. So, I was just the freeloader. The girl who'd married into their little empire and had to play by their rules or get out. My job at the library, which I loved, was a joke to them. Just another reason for them to look down on me. The days blurred into each other, each one a repetition of the last, until that unremarkable Tuesday when everything changed. I was at work shelving books when a sharp pain stabbed through my stomach, doubling me over. It wasn't just stress. It was something more, something worse. The next thing I knew, I was in the hospital, the sterile smell of antiseptic filling my nostrils. Lying in that hospital bed, I couldn't help but think how this was a new low. Alone in pain, with not a single message or call from Ethan. Just when I thought things couldn't get any darker, there was a knock on the door. A visitor. I never expected this. The man at the door was dressed in a suit, holding a briefcase that looked wildly out of place in the sterile hospital room. Yeah, that's me. Who are you? I asked, my voice weak and weary from the pain and relentless disappointment. I'm Michael Johnson, a notary. I have something important to discuss with you, he said, his tone formal but with a glint in his eyes that piqued my curiosity. Despite my situation, I motioned for him to continue. It's about your great-uncle Edward Turner. He passed away recently and you are his sole heir. He left you an inheritance. The words didn't make sense at first. Are you sure you've got the right person? I haven't seen him in 15 years. Michael nodded. Quite sure. He was a private man, but he always remembered you and wanted to make sure you were taken care of. Lying in the hospital bed, I felt a mix of confusion and anticipation as the notary began preparing to explain the specifics of my great-uncle's will. He cleared his throat, opened his briefcase, and laid out the documents. Rita, your great-uncle was a man of substantial wealth and taste. He left you quite the inheritance. Michael began, his voice steady. We're not just talking about cash, though there's plenty of that. $20 million, to be exact. I blinked, trying to process the numbers. $20 million? I echoed, my voice cracking. That's right, Michael confirmed, unfazed by my shock. But there's more? You're also inheriting shares in several major companies. These aren't minor investments. We're talking significant stakes in some of the most stable and profitable firms out there. My mind raced, struggling to grasp the enormity of it all. Owning parts of companies I'd only heard about on the news felt like a fantasy. And then there's the property, Michael continued, flipping through the papers. An old mansion in one of the most prestigious areas. It's not just any house, it's a historic estate with acres of land, and it's all yours now. I tried to imagine the mansion, a place I'd only ever seen in movies. It was overwhelming. Don't forget the antique car, Michael added with a slight smile, as if he anticipated my reaction. A classic, fully restored and in mint condition. It's a collector's dream. I was stunned. The weight of the news, the magnitude of the inheritance, was almost too much to bear. I chuckled, the situation feeling increasingly surreal. An antique car, too. What was I going to do with that? I barely drive as it is. Michael's smile widened. Well, it's yours to do with as you please. Maybe take it for a spin now and then. And then there's the furniture and paintings inside the house, he continued. Genuine antiques, some of them centuries old. Your great-uncle had an eye for the finer things in life. The room seemed to shrink around me, the air thick with the weight of the news. So, I'd inherited a fortune, a company, a mansion, an antique car, and a collection of art and furniture. That's unbelievable, I said, trying to wrap my head around it all. It's all yours, Rita, Michael assured me. Your great-uncle wanted to make sure you were well taken care of. It seems he saw something special in you. Special. I felt anything but special, lying in a hospital bed after the worst few months of my life. Yet here I was, a millionaire many times over, entrusted with a legacy I hadn't known existed. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. This is a lot to take in. I don't even know where to start, I admitted, a mix of gratitude, disbelief, and overwhelming responsibility washing over me. We'll take it one step at a time, Michael said reassuringly. I'm here to help you through the entire process. As if on cue, my phone buzzed, Ethan's name flashing on the screen. Ignoring it, I turned back to Michael. What happens now? We'll need to process some paperwork, but the inheritance is yours, Michael explained. Your life is about to change, Rita. And change it did. After the unexpected windfall, Ethan and his family seemed to turn over a new leaf, or so it seemed. Their daily visits to the hospital felt like scenes from a sappy movie. Ethan, who hadn't been bothered to check on me before, now hovered constantly, adjusting my blanket with a concerned frown. How are you feeling today, love? He'd ask, his voice dripping with a sweetness that didn't quite reach his eyes. Linda, his mother, was even more theatrical, if that was possible. Darling, she cooed. I'm going to cook your favorite lasagna when you get home, Linda said, her smile wide but lacking warmth. It was all too sudden, too much. I played along, offering a weak smile and thanking them for their care, but suspicion gnawed at me, urging me to look beyond their facade. One day, I gathered the strength to follow them after their routine visit. My heart pounded with every step as I slipped out of bed and hid behind a corner, listening as their true selves unfolded. Without an audience, their laughter was harsh and jeering. Can you believe how easy it is? Ethan's voice was dripping with disdain. She's so clueless, just eating right out of our hands. Linda's voice was sharp as she outlined their plan. Make sure she has a baby with you, Ethan. Once she's tied to us with a child, she won't ever be able to leave. We'll have a real hold on her and her fortune. Their cruel, calculating words didn't shock me. Disappointment filled me, yes, but I wasn't surprised. They had shown their true colors, and I was done pretending otherwise. Silently, I returned to my hospital bed, their mocking words igniting a fire within me. They saw me as nothing more than a means to secure their future, but I wasn't going to play their game any longer. Lying there, a plan began to take shape, clear and firm. I would turn the tables on Ethan and his conniving family. They underestimated me, saw me as weak, but I was about to prove them wrong. Once discharged and back at the house, it felt strange, like stepping into a place that was supposed to be home but now felt alien. Ethan and his parents waited for me, their faces painted with false concern and eagerness. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension and expectation. Ethan broke the silence, his voice a mix of feigned sweetness and underlying greed. Babe, you're home. How are you feeling? We've been so worried about you. Ignoring the lump in my throat, I met his gaze, seeing the man I once thought I knew. I'm feeling better, thanks, but we need to talk. All of us. Linda, ever the actress, stepped forward with her hands clasped as if in prayer. Of course, dear. We're here for you, whatever you need. It was now or never. I took a deep breath and laid out my cards. I'm filing for divorce, Ethan. And before you ask, no, you won't see a dime of my inheritance. The room fell into a stunned silence, the air sucked out as if by a vacuum. Ethan's face went pale, his mask slipping to reveal his panic. Divorce? But why? I thought we were happy. Happy. The word tasted bitter on my tongue. You, your mom, and your dad have made my life a living hell. You've treated me like a servant, not a wife. And now you're suddenly worried about me because I'm worth something to you. Ethan stammered, struggling for words, but Linda quickly jumped in. This is nonsense. We've always treated you like family. You're imagining things, dear. I rolled my eyes, ready to stand my ground. I pulled the prenuptial agreement from my bag, waving it in front of Ethan. This, I said, is what saved me. You thought you could play me, but I'm not the naive girl you took me for. George, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. His voice was a mix of anger and defeat. You'll regret this. We're your family. No, I countered. You were never my family. A family doesn't treat one of their own like dirt and then turn sweet when money comes into the picture. I'm done here. Moving into my own place was a breath of fresh air I desperately needed. The apartment was small and cozy, a stark contrast to the life I had left behind. It wasn't just a new living space, it was my declaration of independence and a fresh start. The phone calls started almost immediately. Ethan was the first to reach out, his voice dripping with desperation. Rita, please, you've got to come back. We can work this out. I know we can. His pleas fell on deaf ears. I was done, and no amount of begging could change that. Ethan, it's over. I'm not coming back. You need to accept that, I said firmly, leaving no room for negotiation. Linda's call came next, her tone a toxic mix of anger and guilt-tripping. Ungrateful. After everything we've done for you, you owe us. Rita, you're making a huge mistake. Oh, I owe you for what, Linda? I retorted, for making me feel like nothing more than a burden. No, I don't owe you anything. Goodbye. Hanging up on her felt like shedding a heavy weight, a final cut from the ties that bound me to a life of misery. The divorce was a relief, a clean break from a past that had threatened to consume me. Through friends, I heard about the fallout between Ethan and his parents. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very prenuptial agreement they had insisted on was now the source of their family's strife. With my great-uncle's inheritance securely in my name, I found new purpose and a way to give back. A significant portion went to charities that mattered to me, causes that would make a difference in the world. But it was the bookstore that became my passion project, a cozy haven for lovers of old and rare books. It was my way of reconnecting with the world on my terms. My journey hadn't been easy, fraught with challenges and heartache, but standing in my bookstore surrounded by the stories of countless others, I knew I had found my happy ending. It wasn't just about moving on from Ethan and his family's manipulation. It was about rediscovering who I was and what I loved. Here's to new beginnings, I toasted to myself one quiet evening after closing up shop. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was mine to travel, filled with possibilities and the promise